The first hydrogen fuel cell electric buses to serve public transit customers along the peninsula are now in service, with many more on the way in the weeks, months, and years to come. The San Mateo County Transit District, or SamTrans, recently placed an order for 108 additional hydrogen buses, marking the largest order of its kind in North America to date. The move toward hydrogen at SamTrans is symbolic of a major shift in the public transportation industry. But why hydrogen? What makes this such an attractive carbon-free choice for transit? Where does hydrogen fuel even come from? And is it truly green? I'm Randol White, Public Information Officer at SamTrans, Caltrain, and the San Mateo County Transportation Authority. And joining me to help us answer some of the questions surrounding this shift toward hydrogen are two experts on the topic. David Harbour is the Director of Maintenance at SamTrans and plays a major role in the adoption of the district's new hydrogen fleet. I work with David, so I'm going to take the liberty of calling him Dave today. Hey, thanks for making time to discuss this really significant milestone.
Yeah, no problem, Randall.
And Dr. Lewis Fulton is the Director of the Energy Futures Program at the UC Davis Institute of Transportation Studies. He also chairs the Transportation Working Group of the California Hydrogen Hub, known as ARCHES. Dr. Fulton, we really appreciate having you here to share your expertise regarding the future of hydrogen here in California.
Thank you, Randall. Nice to be here. I'm Lou, and looking forward to the discussion.
All right, so let's start with, I really want to get down to the absolute basics. And I should mention, in the industry, they're referred to as FCEBs, which is short for fuel cell electric bus. But for our purposes today, I'll just call them hydrogen buses. But you might hear that FCEB initialism or hydrogen fuel cell or just fuel cell in the conversation. So I wanted you to know that ahead of time. Now, Dave, on that topic, help us understand how a hydrogen bus works.
Sure. And thanks for clarifying the FCEB, because we'll throw that out there. It's just become part of my vocabulary. But the hydrogen buses, or the FCEBs, basically take a gaseous form of hydrogen, and what it uses as a fuel cell to turn that into electricity that charges batteries that run an electric motor. So it's really a hybrid of sorts.
And is there a reason why SamTrans chose hydrogen over other zero-emission technologies like battery electric? I know there are battery electric buses in the fleet, but this was a big order.
It was this order of 108. We do have 10 buses now. But the reason why we started out with, our SamTrans started out with battery electric buses, a couple things that we learned is that operationally, hydrogen fuel cell buses, we expect them to go almost equivalent to the diesel mileage or range, which is about 300 miles, where a battery electric bus is about 200 miles or so on a full state of charge. So that's one of the biggest reasons as far as operationally. There definitely is a cost difference too, specifically in infrastructure. Bus costs are pretty close.
Like per bus cost?
Yeah, per bus cost are pretty close. Hydrogen being a little bit more expensive. There also is some concerns as far as the amount of electricity we would have needed to do the full transition. With the hydrogen, it kind of mimics what we have now with a diesel fueling station. It's a hydrogen fueling station. So to fill a bus full of gaseous hydrogen, it takes about 12 to 15 minutes, versus on the BEBs, or the battery electric buses, charging at a zero state of charge for 4 hours or so.
The SamTrans service footprint is big, all the way into San Francisco, down into Palo Alto, all of San Mateo County, which also has some significant hills to climb. All of that, I imagine, played a role.
It did. However, the propulsion system on the motors themselves that actually move the bus are similar or shared between both the FCEBs and the BEBs, or battery electric buses. It just becomes the capacity of batteries that you can actually have on a bus does not meet the range requirements that we need for a full day run. Whereas a FCEB or hydrogen bus, it will carry the amount of hydrogen that it will need to convert into electricity so that we can get the range just like a diesel bus.
Lou, let's turn to your area of expertise now to get a broader view of hydrogen as a public transit fuel. California has set ambitious climate goals, including achieving carbon neutrality in the next 20 years. Is hydrogen a reliable tool to reach those targets?
Yes, reliability of the vehicle is very important. Reliability of the fuel system is very important, as are the cost factors, I think, are really important parts of those decisions. And I think Dave's way of describing it is going to be true for just about any transit agency or, let's say, trucking fleet, the choice is really between a technology, battery electrics. They're very reliable, and they can tap into grid electricity pretty easily, but they take a long time to recharge, and they don't have the range that some operations are going to need. And so if you're looking at hydrogen, it's because you're hoping to get the same level of reliability and performance, but with the fast refueling and the longer range. And so that's really the trade-off. Battery electric buses and trucks have been around a little bit longer, although we do have quite a number of fuel cell buses in operation in California since late 20-teens. I think AC Transit may have been the first agency to run fuel cells, but there have been really good experiences up and down the different groups that have been running these buses with reliability. And, a certain amount of maintenance that may be beyond what you do with the diesel bus, but improving every year and on a trajectory to become quite a reliable technology.
Can we say at this point that hydrogen is a viable petroleum replacement, or is it just a tool, one tool in the chest of clean energy strategies?
Well, it's certainly a viable replacement. There really are only two options if you want zero emissions, right? And these are the two. They're either electric or hydrogen. And incidentally, even with hydrogen, you can run hydrogen in an internal combustion engine. And there are, for example, some truck technologies, some companies that are putting those. They are not going to be zero emission for things like NOx. But a fuel cell bus is zero emission for NOx. So California is prioritizing things that are truly zero emission, not just for greenhouse gases, but also for pollutant emissions. And these are your two choices. So I think most transit agencies, and for that matter, most trucking fleets, are probably going to be interested in a mix of electric and hydrogen. They have their advantages and disadvantages. It may be that, let's say, for some applications, the battery electrics are always going to be cheaper to own and operate. But again, they don't have quite the level of service that you can get out of a fuel cell. So I'd say it's a tool out of the two tools, but likely to play a pretty important role for many agencies.
Dave, back to you now. Transitioning to a fleet of well over 100 hydrogen buses in the next couple of years, that's a big task. Walk us through briefly, if you could, the infrastructure SamTrans has to develop to support this shift.
It is a big change, huge change. And really, there's not a lot of data out there. And Dr. Fulton mentioned about AC Transit. They were one of the pioneers of the FCEBs. So very, very small sample. And there's been several different generations since then, just in the fuel cell itself. So we're really pioneering all this. So we're really kind of creating the data for others to learn. We are pretty tight-knit in the transit community throughout the state, throughout the country, though, on committees and so on and so forth that we do meet regularly. But for us here at SamTrans, safety is paramount, and this is just part of workforce development, is that we've gone through and to make sure we're in alignment with the National Fire Protection Agency, so working with our safety department and for those external sources where we can get that training. Also, we hired an external source to do skills gap analysis. We're going through the final review on that just to see how to best transition our diesel mechanics, which have many, many years of experience, over to the ZEB fleets. Another thing, too, is that we have to look at our store's inventory and parts and how we need to transition that over. And then our workflow processes, which goes back to the workforce development and the safety and PPE.
Yeah. Lou, Dave brought up the safety aspect. Studies do show that hydrogen is generally considered to be a safer fuel than diesel or gasoline when handled responsibly. Can you help us explain why that is?
Well, it's less exposed to combustion situations, and we just have to realize that gasoline and diesel are not the safest fuels. I think that's kind of the information gap here. There are many thousands of car fires every year related to those fuels, or truck fires, and there have been very few incidents of mishaps with the hydrogen vehicles that are out there. We've got somewhere around 15,000 light-duty hydrogen fuel cell vehicles running on the streets of California, and there have been very few issues with that. The stations, we have around 50 stations, very successful in terms of any way of measuring safety. The station reliability is another question, and that's been improving. But safety, it has not been an issue, really. And then, of course, it's partly because the safety standards are so tight and are being followed very rigorously.
And the gas is really light and disperses quickly, right? So it's hard for it to be concentrated enough to cause a problem.
Right. If there are leaks, the hydrogen goes straight up. And there can be, but it's not, it's not a major explosion risk under most leakage circumstances. That's right.
So one common question, Lou, that people have is about the environmental footprint of hydrogen production. Not all hydrogen is created the same way, correct?
That's right. And I kind of misspoke a minute ago because hydrogen is not automatically a zero greenhouse gas fuel. If you run hydrogen in a fuel cell, bus or truck or car, it is going to be zero pollutant emissions. The only thing coming out of the tailpipe is water. However, in the production of hydrogen, you might produce greenhouse gases, and you will produce greenhouse gases if you derive the hydrogen from natural gas. And that is where a lot of the hydrogen comes from these days. You can also have biomass to hydrogen and get your methane that way, and that could be near zero emission, near zero greenhouse gas. The state has a goal of having zero greenhouse gas hydrogen, and in that Arches hub that is just really kicking off now, the only hydrogen that will be part of that hub in terms of the funded projects will be electrolytic hydrogen, so you use electricity with electrolysis to produce the hydrogen. And that, as long as the electricity is clean, that is a zero carbon, zero greenhouse gas pathway. So that is what the state is prioritizing.
Dave, where is SamTrans in the process of sourcing its hydrogen?
Right now, we're currently under contract that came with our, we call it our temporary fueling facility. It's more like a mobile fueling facility. We estimate it has a capacity to fill 30 buses per day, or FCBs a day. But the hydrogen that we purchased right now was under that contract by the vendor. My understanding is that back to what Dr. Fulton was saying, there's different ways of refining it. And right now, because of the hub being developed, they may source it at different sources. And some sources might be more greener than the rest. But also, too, to factor in is that transportation will factor into the overall greenness or green rating of the hydrogen. So,
meaning getting it to us, right?
Right. If it's actually green where it's produced, but it's transported with a diesel truck, that factors into, quote unquote, the greenness of it. So that's another thing, too. The vendor that we're purchasing it from are looking into hydrogen trucks to transport. And I think that industry is developing. That's just kind of what they're waiting for, is that opportunity for those trucks to be vetted and purchased.
We're somewhat in an infancy stage right now, so all of those parts have to be developed. And on that topic, other transit districts will be looking to SamTrans in the coming years as the agency makes this hydrogen shift. Where have you turned to for examples to help guide the process? AC Transit?
AC Transit's one. Orange County Transit Authority is another. We also have a onboard CTE, where we've onboarded CTE as a consultant. So Champaign-Urbana is another agency. They've put me in contact with my peer there at Champaign-Urbana in Illinois. There's also, I believe, Humboldt. So Humboldt has come down. Santa Cruz is, they have a hydrogen order. So the chief operating officer will keep in touch with me quite a bit and ask me questions as needed. But it's really about sharing information. And again, the networking environment was already established well before this transition. So it's really, really a huge advantage to have that established. We've just known each other for years and years and years. So it's really easy to pick up the phone, and it costs nothing to say, hey, what's happening over there? Or how are you doing this? Or even when you're developing some type of scope of work or spec, the lessons learned now are just priceless.
Yeah, that's great. Dr. Fulton, what's your outlook for hydrogen's role in public transit over the next decade?
I would say that at this point, California is the leader on this, although you mentioned Champaign-Urbana, that's near Chicago. There are other transit agencies, I think in Portland, Seattle, they're looking at these things. But the Arches hub is targeting 1,000 fuel cell buses in California by about 2030. So clearly SamTrans will be an important part of that, as will a number of other transit agencies. And I don't know what the exact number of orders exists right now, but we're getting into the hundreds. And I think we have a good chance to see 1,000 buses running by 2030. That's a large number of buses. We're going to learn a lot. We're going to hopefully bring down the costs dramatically through scale and learning. And then that creates the opportunity for many more transit agencies around the country to play in that space, a more affordable space with a good track record. And I think that's kind of the way we look at it.
Well, then finally, Dave, these buses in the SamTrans fleet, the hydrogen ones, they're clearly marked. So when someone boards one, they'll be able to know they're getting on a new hydrogen bus?
They will. They do look much like a battery electric, one of our New Flyer battery electric buses. These are New Flyer hydrogen buses. We put this graphic on the back. It's some bubbles, and there's some bubbles up on the upper cap, but it does say hydrogen on the upper cap. So the overall, it has a SamTrans design, but overlaid on that, you'll be able to tell that it is a hydrogen bus. It'll ride and kind of sound, or won't sound, like a battery electric bus. It's very, very quiet. But yeah, keep an eye out for the graphics on there in hydrogen.
All right, Dave Harbour, Director of Maintenance at SamTrans, looking forward to following along as the district grows its fleet of hydrogen buses. Thanks again for your time today.
Thank you.
And Dr. Lou Fulton, Director of the Energy Futures Program at the UC Davis Institute of Transportation Studies. Thank you as well for making time to discuss this really significant shift toward hydrogen as a green fuel source for public transit.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Again, I'm Randol White. Find more information at samtrans.com/blog, and thanks for listening.